Hello, daughters. Our lesson for February 8th is about the Wyoming historical markers placed by DUP camps. It's from our book, Tales of Triumph, and is entitled Wyoming DUP Markers. Wyoming was important in the history of the Utah pioneers. Historians estimate that as many as 70,000 pioneers traveled through Wyoming on their way to the Utah Territory. Many experiences of the pioneers occurred in Wyoming, including the stories of the stranded Martin and Willie handcart companies and the Hodgett and Hunt wagon companies. During the 1850s, immigrants trekked through Wyoming on three well-used trails, including the California Trail, Mormon Trail, and Oregon Trail. After pioneers established homes in the Utah Territory, many were called to leave the Salt Lake Valley. Wyoming was a destination for some of those settlers. In 1803, the territory of Louisiana was purchased by the United States from France. Areas of Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado, east of the Continental Divide, were part of this acquisition. The southwestern portion of Wyoming was part of the Spanish Empire and then the Mexican territory until it was ceded to the United States in 1848 at the end of the Mexican-American War. The territory of Wyoming was organized as an incorporated territory of the United States on July 25, 1868, and was admitted to the Union as the state of Wyoming on July 10, 1890. Daughters of Utah Pioneers currently maintain 14 historical markers in Wyoming. Marker number 237, Star Valley. Star Valley, Wyoming is located between the Salt River Range in western Wyoming and the Webster Range of eastern Idaho. The 45-mile-long valley ranges from 5,600 feet to 7,000 feet in elevation and contains three major Wyoming rivers, consisting of Salt River, Grays River, and Snake River, which meet near Alpine Junction at Palisades Reservoir. These are three current pictures of Star Valley. On August 29, 1878, Apostle Brigham Young Jr., along with Moses Thatcher, the 36-year-old president of the Cache Valley Stake, and William Booker Preston, the presiding bishop of the church, gathered in the Upper Salt River Valley to dedicate it for colonization. Word quickly spread, and the migration began early in the summer of 1879 when the mountain passes were open. The first settlers were 6 interrelated families from the Bear River Valley who settled in the area that was to be known as Freedom. Following later that summer, 5 more families from Morgan, Utah, settled along Stunk Creek in an area later to be called Auburn. During the first winter of 1879 to 1880, these saints discovered why there had been no permanent settlements before this time. The unexpected cold was difficult to endure by the settlers who were living in log cabins with sod roofs and dirt floors. They went hungry and lost most of their stock, but they made improvements and persevered. According to a traditional story, in the early days of Star Valley, there was such a great variation of time in personal clocks and watches that Thomas Burton, a counselor in the bishopric, suggested that a bell be put in the church tower to be rung at certain times so all clocks could be set. The bell was purchased for the price of $400 and weighed 800 pounds. It was placed in the tower of the church in 1900 and was rung at 9:30 and 9:50 every Sunday morning for 40 years. If you're following along in the book, you may notice that the picture of the marker in the book is incorrect. It does not have a bell. So this picture is the actual picture of the marker number 237, Star Valley in Afton, Wyoming. Marker number 540, Burlington Tithing House. Burlington is a small farming and ranching community in Bighorn County, Wyoming. Located in the northeastern part of the state, it lies between Yellowstone National Park and the Black Hills. The community was settled by pioneers from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A log LDS church was built in 1897. The tithing house was constructed on the same lot and used until 1929 when it was no longer needed. The tithing house was then moved and used for storage. Number 554, Penrose Ward Tithing House, Byron, Wyoming. Penrose, Wyoming was one of the early pioneer communities of the Bighorn Basin. The town was named for Charles W. Penrose, an early apostle of the church. Established in the early 1900s, there were enough children for a 3-room cement block school building and enough young adults for dances, which drew crowds from nearby Garland and Byron. In 1907, the early settlers built a tithing house, using it as a collecting point for non-cash tithes. The churchgoers gave crops, grain, animals, beans, and other items which were managed by the bishop and redistributed to those in need. When tithes and offering were no longer paid in kind, the building was relocated. Marker number 567, Bighorn Academy, Cowley, Wyoming. In 1900, the prophet and president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Lorenzo Snow, sent settlers to northern Wyoming under the direction of Apostle Abraham Owen Woodruff. The settlers were there to establish 2 communities and build the Sidon Canal, which would furnish water from the Shoshone River to the surrounding communities. In State Conference, September 11, 1908, Apostle David O. McKay announced that a church school would be built to accommodate church members in this section of the Bighorn County. The Bighorn Academy in Cowley, Wyoming was built with native sandstone, and the inscription stone over the south entrance was a tribute to the ingenuity and strength of the early pioneers. The huge inscription stone, 12 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 2 feet thick, weighed about 4 tons and was cut in one solid piece. The inscription, cut by L.C. Jensen, reads, Bighorn Academy, 1916. All of the stones used for the building's construction had to be hauled from hills 5 miles north of Cowley, shaped at the site, and set in place without the benefit of power equipment. The building was new, modern, and equipped with a heating plant and ventilating system. The academy was discontinued in 1924. The building was sold to the school district and used until 1983 as a high school. Since that time, it has been used as a preschool for private businesses. In 2011, it was extensively remodeled to become the administration building for Bighorn County School District Number 1. Marker number 78, First Brick Church in Evanston, Wyoming. Evanston was named after railroad surveyor James A. Evans. The LDS church building was completed in 1889 on the corner of Main and 7th Street. It was described as a neat brick edifice, which was the first brick church building in Wyoming. The building and furniture cost $4,000. Marker number 52, First Schoolhouse in Wyoming, Fort Bridger, Wyoming. Jim Bridger, originally James Bridger, was born in March 17, 1804 in Richmond, Virginia. He was a fur trapper and explorer, and he established Fort Bridger in southwestern Wyoming in 1843 as a fur trading post and way station for immigrants going west on the Oregon Trail. He is believed to be the first non-native to visit the Great Salt Lake and among the first to explore the wonders of the Yellowstone region. The first schoolhouse in Wyoming, Judge William A. Carter erected it for the education of his 4 daughters, 2 sons, and other children at Fort Bridger. Competent instructors from the East were employed, and the students of this school were permitted to enter Eastern colleges without further preparation. Thus, the way was paved for future education in Wyoming. The first Christmas in Jackson Hole. The first winter was a pleasant one and yet a hard one. Their milk cows perished, and they lived the most part on elk meat and water gravy. During the long winter nights, they burned a piece of twisted cloth soaked in elk tallow. This light was called a bitch light. On Christmas, all the residents gathered at Will Crawford's home for a feast and celebration. Each household contributed their share of the victuals of elk steaks, roast wild geese, and ducks, vegetables, plum pudding, mince pies, and delicious donuts fried in bear grease, which also makes delicious pie crust. Supper was served during a brief intermission at midnight, and in the morning they ate breakfast before departing for their homes. They never traveled after night in those days, as the roads were not good. Marker 123, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. In 1889, 5 Mormon families pioneered Jackson Hole, making the trip of 28 miles in 14 days over the Teton Pass. Their leader was Elijah N. Wilson, known among the people as Uncle Nick, famous Indian scout and Pony Express rider. They found 18 single men living in the valley. These families established homes and later built a fort for protection against the Indians. The first LDS services were held on Easter Sunday, 1890. Sylvester Wilson was the presiding elder. Marker number 537, Women of the Sixth Crossing of the Sweetwater. A tragic chapter of the Saints' journey across the plains contains the story of the Martin and Willie Handcart Companies of 1856. One of the women of the Willie Handcart Company was Lucy Ward. Lucy was born in London, England. The family was well-to-do, employing servants and tutors while living in a fine house. Lucy received a superior education and became a seamstress. She was taught to be a proper lady. Lucy's mother, a sister, and 2 brothers, along with Lucy, were baptized as members of the church after her father died. Within a few years, her mother and sister died. Her 2 brothers married, leaving her to live alone. A faithful convert of the church, she made plans to emigrate to Utah to be with the saints. She left England in December of 1855 when she was 22 years old on the John J. Boyd. She spent her first year in America working as a milliner in New York City to make enough money to finance her journey to the Salt Lake Valley. She joined the Willie Handcart Company in 1856. She had to leave many of her beautiful possessions behind. She packed her handcart and made a late start to the west. Lucy had a beautiful fur jacket from England, but decided it was impractical to take, so she cut it apart and made some warm fur moccasins, a muff, and a hat, which she tied on her head with a green scarf. Even with these warm accessories, she suffered greatly from the cold, and her feet became badly frozen as the company encountered severe weather. The rescue wagons arrived for the Willie Handcart Company on October 21st. Along with the others, Lucy felt her life was saved by these angelic men who risked their own lives to save them. James Barnett Cole, who lived in Fort Bridger, was one of the rescuers, joining the first rescue party as it came through Fort Bridger. As they searched for the handcart companies, he dreamed one night that he would meet his future wife with the stranded saints. He saw her clearly in his dreams. a beautiful woman with a fur cap and a green veil tied over the cap to keep the wind off. He told this dream to his friend and fellow rescuer, William Kimball, who remarked, "We will see no beautiful girl with a fur cap and a green veil with these frozen saints." When the rescuers came upon the first saints in their makeshift shelter, William Kimball caught sight of a pioneer woman with a green scarf and fur cap and called to his friend, "Brother Jim, there is your dream girl." James approached her and tried to help her into his wagon. Ever proper, she refused by saying, "No, I don't know you." As the rescuers cared for the pioneer group, Lucy must have finally become used to having James around, because on November 2nd they were married at Fort Bridger by William Kimball. Lucy and James stayed at Fort Bridger and nearby Fort Supply for the rest of the winter. Lucy was nursed back to health and her feet were saved. James and Lucy Cole came into the Salt Lake Valley in the spring of 1857 and settled in the town of Willard to help James's father run his flour mill. Number 357, to Utah in 1868, Laramie, Wyoming. In July 1868, the shifting terminal of the Union Pacific Railroad reached Laramie and nearby Benton, Wyoming. Approximately 5,000 Old World converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were met at these points by about 500 teamsters sent in June by President Brigham Young to take wagons and supplies for the Saints' journey to Utah. Returning August and September, they were the last of the organized immigration companies. In 1869, the railroad spanned the continent. Marker number 371, Osmond, Wyoming. Dry Creek, later called Mount Pleasant, was settled in 1886. The first public building was erected in 1891 and was a log schoolhouse. Also used as a church, students furnished their own desks and stools. George Hardman was the teacher. Osmond Ward organized September 8, 1901. Andrew M. Nelson was the bishop. The name of the town honored George Osmond, first president of Star Valley Stake Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Marker number 511, Muddy Creek Camp and Crossing, Piedmont, Wyoming. The Muddy Creek Camp, which was northwest of this marker and on the west side of the Muddy Creek, was used by Brigham Young's first group of Mormon pioneers who arrived here on July 9, 1847. Thomas Bullock reported that the brethren sang hymns for President Brigham Young, and they had a delightful evening. This camp had good water and plenty of grass, and the animals were well fed by the tall bunch grass growing along the creek. Erastus Snow described the campground as very pretty. It was one of the most heavily used camps on the Overland Trail. Mormon and California Pony Express trails. Approximately 70,000 Mormon pioneers crossed, passed through, or camped at Muddy Creek Campground. The U.S. Army camped here with 2,000 men in June of 1858. Both the Martin and Willie Handcart companies crossed here in November of 1856. While traveling with rescue wagons, the Muddy Overland Stage Stop and Pony Express stations were located at this site, and foundation stones may still be seen along the west bank of Muddy Creek. The road by the marker was the original Transcontinental Railroad bed of 1869. The Transcontinental Telegraph, Automobile Road, and Stage Line either go through the campground or are very nearby, making Muddy Creek Camp an important part of this area's history. Marker number 277, First Post Office, Thane, Wyoming. This is present-day Thane. Thane, formerly called Glencoe, founded in 1888, at which time mail was brought into Star Valley by team and wagon and distributed to people from a log cabin owned by Joseph Thane. The building was one room, 12 by 15 feet with dirt roof. 3 years later, it was moved to the center of town, and Henry Thane and his wife occupied it. This log cabin, located 1.5 rods west of the site, became the first post office May 8, 1891, with Laura Thane. Marker number 581, Thane Relief Society Hall. In 1908, led by Lydia Tittenser, the women of the Relief Society of the Thane Ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints decided they wanted a room for their quilting. Bishop George Miller was approached for help, but the sisterhood was informed that there was no money for such a project. Not to be deterred, the Relief Society took the matter into their own hands and raised the necessary funds. Lydia Tittenser has an interesting life story. She was a third-generation member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and she was raised from the time she was 9 to be a midwife, which was what her grandmother was. So she was a long-time midwife in the area of Thane after her marriage. The Silver Star Camp members still hold their meetings today in the Thane Relief Society Hall. Looking forward to meeting with you all again when we are no longer virtual.